Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a big show for you today. This Tuesday, lots of news happening. Obviously, Donald Trump will be speaking tonight for his not quite State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress. And to discuss all of the important issues at play, I am joined by Marianne Williamson, my friend. I am delighted to see you again.
I'm delighted to see you too. I'm going to try hard to keep up with you, Robby.
I think we are going to have a lot of spirited...
How the rest of America feels.
discussion, some argument today, but it should be fun.
I'll do my best. What's on your radar today?
Happy to tell you. Well, the mainstream media, the Democratic Party, even the old school neoconservative establishment wing of the GOP has disparaged President Donald Trump over how he's treated President Zelensky and the Ukrainian issue, for pressing for peace and admitting the quiet part out loud that Ukraine can't possibly win a war against Russia and needs to agree to a peace deal. Trump has been attacked as a Putin puppet, Neville Chamberlain-esque figure who is betraying the values of the Republic. We're also used to sensational anti-Trump commentary from the media, but Trump's most recent standoff with Zelensky has prompted some of the most unhinged, frothing at the mouth denunciations of Trump from Democrats and their media allies that I've ever seen in 8 years of spectating Trump world. Now, here's a question I have. Do the people agree with media outlets, with media elites, and the Democrats that Trump's conduct with respect to Ukraine is beyond the pale? The answer, as best we can tell, of course not. According to recent polling by CBS News and YouGov, voters award Trump's handling of Ukraine a net favorability of +2 points. Now, that's not a huge margin, it's true. Let's keep in mind that by the end of his term, voters' approval of Joe Biden's handling of Ukraine was -22 points. Talk about a reality check. Here's CNN pollster Harry Enton educating his colleagues about the fact that voters approve, albeit narrowly, of Trump on Ukraine.
I think the easiest way we can kind of just ask this is, do Americans like the way that Trump's handling his job and compare it to how they felt about Joe Biden? So this is the net approval rating. You look at Joe Biden back in 2024, he was 22 points underwater. Holy cow. You look at Donald Trump, it's just a different planet entirely. I mean, the gulf between these two is wider than the Gulf of America or Mexico, depending on which side of the aisle you stand on. He's at +2. So look, at this particular point, Americans are giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt. He's doing considerably better than Joe Biden was doing on the handling of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And so on this simple question, I think Americans are saying, okay, Donald Trump's doing all right on this.
What about specifically on how they feel about bringing the war to an end?
Yeah, okay. So, look, questions on this can be quite complicated, but I think this kind of gets at sort of where the American trend line is. Americans on the Russia-Ukraine war want a quicker end of the war, but Russia keeps its captured land. Look at this, 50%. Bare majority coming in here. Support Ukraine's right to fight, even if it means a longer war. That's at 48. This is very, very close. But the trend line on this question is so important because that want a quick end of the war, look at this. You go back to August of 2022, it was at 31%. Now we're at 50%. I mean, that is a rocket ship upwards in terms of the Americans who want a quick end to the war, even if it means Russia keeps the captured Ukraine land. Americans are moving closer and closer to wanting a compromise, even if it means that Ukraine doesn't really get what it set out to want.
Now, these results are likely surprising to members of the media, but how many times do they have to learn this lesson? The American people are always reflexively less hawkish, less pro-war, less pro-military engagement than the media itself. Public opinion of American intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan soured long before elite media and the leadership of both political parties admitted that U.S. foreign policy experts had made a huge mistake. Elites love the idea of the U.S. as world policeman, whereas normal folks, ordinary people, just want America first, leave other countries alone, and don't start endlessly interfering in problems that have little to do with us and that we can't possibly solve. The fact that Donald Trump has actually broken with the bipartisan foreign policy establishment to bring America closer to this vision is terrifying for the media, in part because it makes Trump more popular. According to recent polling by JL Partners and the Daily Mail, Trump's approval rating has actually increased slightly from 1 month ago. It's now at 54%. JL Partners, by the way, was one of the most accurate predictors in the 2024 election. Another poll has Trump at 50% with adults and above 50% with Gen Z. Kids love Trump. Other pollsters have Trump a bit further down than that. CNN, for instance, has him at 48% approval. PBS has him at 45%. So look, it's not all rosy for Trump. Things could definitely turn against him. For instance, Trump announced yesterday that he was moving forward with the tariffs on Canada and Mexico after all, which caused the stock market to absolutely tank when he announced it, and it has fallen further since with those tariffs actually going into effect. Trump should keep in mind that one of the major reasons he won re-election is that voters did not trust Democrats on the economy. They rightly feared, in my view, that progressive policies would raise prices and kill jobs. Tariffs will have the same effect. Using tariffs as a negotiating tool is one matter. Actually implementing them is going to cause economic hardship for the American people. Now, we'll find out more tonight about Trump's plans for his second term. He is scheduled to address the nation via a joint session of Congress at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And the reason I wanted to do this subject for my radar, Marianne, is because I think the focus on the media is so foreign policy focused, even though many poll results show that Americans care about their immediate economic situation primarily. It doesn't mean they don't care about foreign policy, but that's the thing that animates them. So whereas the media treats how he's treating Ukraine as, some unpardonable sin, the polls actually show that it's at least somewhat divided. Now, what could tank Trump, and this is where I think we'll probably agree, I don't think tariffs are a good idea. I've been against them from the start. I was against Joe Biden's tariffs. Actually, there's a lot of continuity between Biden and Trump on tariffs. I think implementing this could create some real hardship and does risk blowing up the other successes Trump is experiencing.
It absolutely will. I mean, who wants these tariffs other than Donald Trump himself? This is going to, certainly it's not going to help with inflation. It's going to make things worse. It's going to raise prices on oil. It's going to raise prices on food products, on consumer goods. And Nate Silver, by the way, says that his approval rate is dropping. So I look forward to talking to you a little bit later about Ukraine. But even on these immediate economic issues, I think the American people are going to buy it for just so long that Donald Trump, with no reasoning, there's no reasoning why he's going after Canada or going after Mexico like this. I think the American people are going to figure this out sooner rather than later. Right now he's saying to people, it's going to be hard for a while, but what? But it's worth it because what? There is no end to that sentence that makes sense to any thinking person.
Right, and we need to sacrifice to achieve some nebulous foreign policy goal is honestly a little bit similar in my mind to the interventionist mindset that on military matters he has correctly pushed against. The tariffs will hurt. They'll hurt our neighbors, and I know Trump thinks we're not getting enough out of them, or he wants different immigration policies or different fentanyl-related policies, but this will, I agree with you, raise prices on Americans, and that is their top concern. That is the top concern of the people expressed in the last election. I think a lot of goodwill that Trump has will be eaten up by making the immediate economic situation worse for people. This is something that this is the issue he's crossed most often by people in his own ideological coalition. I've seen a lot of pushback of this from libertarians like myself, even some, I think, on the more nationalist or populist right who care a lot about the circumstances of workers. The prices are going to go up, and so he needs to be cognizant of that.
I think the American people are willing to sacrifice for a good reason, but he has not presented, nor can he present, a good reason why he's doing this, for instance, to Canada. Less than 1% of the fentanyl that comes to this country comes through fentanyl. He's really big on all this. We got to keep them from letting the bad guys in. We can't let the bad guys come through the southern border. We can't let the bad guys come through the northern border. This man has done more to let the bad guys in. This is the man who just let Andrew Tate back into the country. This is the man who just let all these violent criminals from January 6th back onto the streets. So this stuff is only going to work for so long before people, and I think it is happening on all these things, whether it has to do with Ukraine, whether it has to do with these tariffs, where people are saying, what is really going on here?
We
talk about Ukraine later in the show.
Too wrapped up on this. On the Andrew Tate thing, though, I can't not comment on that. I think, I think he's a reprehensible human being,
Thank
certainly.
you.
I don't think he should be anyone's idol, but, everyone is entitled to due process. The case against him he's not been convicted yet in Romania.
Really? Everybody has a right to due process. So what about all those undocumented workers who we now know, only 41% who have been picked up by ICE, had a criminal record?
Andrew Tate is an American citizen. And so I don't think our government can stop. Now, I don't think he should get some kind of hero's welcome, and I don't think conservatives should, appreciate him as someone who is like a self-professed beater of women to be welcomed in the coalition is terrible. But I also, wouldn't. He's an American citizen. I don't think I don't know that the government has any legal ground to repulse him. And I appreciate what Ron DeSantis said, that he is not, morally welcome in Florida, and we'll look at if there's any reason we have to not have him here, but we can't just, that would be a kind of dictatorship to just arbitrarily declare this person can't come into the country.
It's very rare for me to say, yay, Ron DeSantis, but if he said that Andrew Tate is not morally welcome in Florida, good for him. At some point, and this goes across all these issues, America's going to have to reclaim its moral compass, which is absolutely at a low point regarding Ukraine, regarding so many of these things, and definitely regarding Andrew Tate.
Well, we're going to discuss Ukraine policy a lot more today, and then, of course, we'll be looking forward to Trump's remarks on this topic tonight. Still to come on Rising, lots more. Stay with us. It'll be fun. When it comes to Zelensky and Ukraine, President Trump means business. He has made the decision to suspend all military aid to Ukraine late yesterday, which has the world's western capitals aflutter. Trump told reporters yesterday he believes Russia wants peace, but that, quote, someone doesn't want to make a deal.
And the deal can be made very fast. It should not be that hard a deal to make. It could be made very fast. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal, and if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long.
That comment reflects MAGA's growing calls for Zelensky to step aside or maybe hold an election in Ukraine.
Stopping aid to Kyiv is just one of a string of moves that could have been plucked straight from Vladimir Putin's personal playbook. Some of the other friendly moves by Trump includes a move by Pete Hegseth yesterday to suspend offensive cyber and information operations against Russia, even though they certainly have them against us and ongoing. Trump is also ordered to look at what sanctions against Russia could now be loosened. Trump has been on a Moscow-friendly tirade as he says he wants to spur peace in Ukraine and have a closer tie to nuclear-powered Russia.
Meanwhile, Peter Ducey of Fox News reported the following about the feud between Zelensky and Trump.
I have been told by a senior official here that nothing's going to happen with this minerals deal until Zelensky goes in front of cameras and makes an explicit public apology for the way that he behaved himself, behaved in the Oval Office with that meeting.
Now, many in MAGA world say they believe Trump is dead on correct about the right path. Representative Darrell Issa tweeted this in support. Today, I will nominate Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. No one deserves it more.
Across the Atlantic, there are growing calls to finance security or reconstruction with the roughly $300 billion owned by Russia's central bank that had been frozen. The funds were frozen by the United States, the European Union, Britain, and others after Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The aim then was to punish President Vladimir Putin for his unprovoked attack and to cut off funds he could use to wage war. Now, many others than the United States could release the funds to Ukraine.
Well, on that last strategy, clearly hasn't worked. We have not put any dent in Russia's financial willingness or desire to continue a war against Ukraine. And if Europe was really serious about punishing Russia, they could end their addiction to Russian energy, something Donald Trump has warned them about for years and years and years and years. You know, look, if Europe wants to Europe should start taking this more seriously. They think this is existential. They stand with Zelensky. Then they can pay for it, and they can really stick it to Russia by having different energy options. Clearly going in a non-nuclear direction was a catastrophic mistake that made them more reliant on Russia. But here we are. I still hope a peace deal is possible. I don't really care if Zelensky apologizes or not. I don't care if he puts on a suit or not. All of that's a little silly. But he should come back, agree to the deal, and we should have peace. What's wrong with that?
The issue is, what's the deal? We all want peace. The idea here is just telling Ukraine to roll over is hardly a peace deal. You know, I'm not frothing at the mouth here, but I have to tell you something. I know what a toady for Russia looks like, and that would be Donald Trump at this point. Everything he is saying is exactly what the Russians would have him say. When you say that Europe should step up more, they are planning to step up more, and they have actually given more money than we have. The European continent is trying to protect itself. What we're talking about now, what Trump is talking about now, what you seem to support, would be Russia just going in there. This would be the opposite of peace. And without any kind of security guarantees, we talk about America first. Shouldn't Europe, doesn't it make sense that they'd be talking about Europe first? That Ukraine would be talking about Ukraine? For us to just say, roll over, He's going to go in there. This is a brutal dictator. The American people are asking, what the hell's going on here? This man is a brutal dictator who kills his political opponents. That's who Putin is. And yet now we're voting with him. This is an earthquake in world geopolitics. We are attacking and ditching our loyal allies, and we are siding with Belarus and Iran and North Korea and Russia at the United Nations. Something is going on here that doesn't pass the smell test. And when you talk about the polls, 81% of the American people say that we should not be trusting Vladimir Putin. So should we be trusting the views of a man who, he will say things like, Russia and I, we've really been through a lot together. And I think, and we're going to be talking to Sarah Kendzior about this later, yeah, what has he been going through with the Russians over the last few decades? I think the American people are starting to ask some intelligent questions, and it's about time.
A lot I can say in response to that. Look, I don't have any, I'm perfectly clear-eyed about who Vladimir Putin is and who Xi Jinping is, and who the people who lead Iran and North Korea and all these other bad countries are thugs and authoritarians. Absolutely, but we are parting ways with the neoconservative bipartisan notion that we can just wipe out people we don't like and rebuild their countries and have peace and love and it'll be great, that they'll welcome us as liberators. Well, that doesn't work.
That's hardly what I said. That's hardly what I said.
But well, then what are we supposed to do, Marianne? We can't. I wish I could magically make Vladimir Putin disappear, but I can't. He's going to continue to be the leader of Russia. All I can do, or all Trump can do, is prevent thousands of more people from dying in Ukraine, thousands of more Russians and thousands of more Ukrainians. Isn't that worth doing? Even if Ukraine, what if it takes 500,000 or 1 million deaths to get the Ukrainian territory back? Are you willing to do that? I'm not.
Number one, what you can do is support a fair deal. Number two, first of all, if Putin wanted to stop this war, he could stop this war. Putin, when you say you want the killing to stop, if we do the deal that Donald Trump is now suggesting, this will so not be the killing stop. The Russians will go in there and we will see a horror perpetrated against the Ukrainians as punishment without security guarantees. That's why these security guarantees are so important. What we are, America is we are so short-sighted sometimes. This is not going to be all Putin saying, okay, it's all over now. We'll just take what we want. You guys be happy.
The horror is being perpetrated right now, and it's going to continue unless Zelensky gets in line with Trump. The only way it's going to end is that way. There's no other way for it to end. Or if we say, okay, we've done our part, Europe's turn, and I take your point that Europe cumulatively has given somewhat more than us.
Yes,
it's like 130 versus 150, somewhere
139,
in there.
120.
Yeah. Okay, so we're giving about as much as all of Europe. This is happening in their backyard, not ours. So I think it's fair for them to give even tremendously more than us. We're the major, NATO is the beneficiary of, it's the U.S. mostly paying for it. The American people are sick of it, Marianne. You know that they are.
This is the deal. We don't have clean hands either. The way this whole war started was not cool. But the conversation, the narrative that you're promulgating right now is the same narrative that would have had us not get into World War II. The idea that what happens in Europe has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with support of and protection of Western liberal democratic values. Yes, that has to do with us. And once again, when you ask what can we do, we can have a better deal. I'm not saying let's not make a deal, but I'm saying let's have a deal that takes into account the needs of the Ukrainians and not just the desires of the Kremlin.
World War II is different because, we were attacked by the allies of
at that point,
Germany.
we'd just been attacked by Japan. We were not attacked by Germany.
Yes, but Japan was in an alliance with Germany. Our allies were under vicious assault by Germany, and we were attacked, and Hitler was bent on total global domination. I think it's a little bit of World War II is in all of our wars that we've had, and I would have thought you would have agreed with this as a progressive person. In the wars over the course of U.S. history, yeah, you can point to one where it was very necessary to get involved in that war, World War II. There's very little disagreement there. But all of the other times, haven't we said in hindsight, yeah, we didn't need to be involved. That was people dying for no reason. World War I, the Spanish-American War. And Vietnam, Korea, I agree with what I thought are most progressives probably, and also libertarian conservatives, that that the whole theory of needing intervention in those cases was bad and wrong. And you say defending Western liberal democracy, which I agree is important. But what J.D. Vance is saying about our Western allies, which I wholly agree with, is that they're out there trying to tell American tech companies that they don't want free speech or they don't want those kinds of things. So they're not upholding liberal Western policies. Why don't they stop bullying American companies for practicing American Western Enlightenment ideas, and then we'll talk.
Why doesn't J.D. Vance stop trying to bully European leaders? I didn't say that we were attacked. What I am saying, however, is it is false narrative to say that what happens in Europe has nothing to do with us. Because what happens in Europe absolutely has something to do with us, if not today, then tomorrow. And our thinking about policy should not just include what's right in front of us, but what is likely to come down the road in 6 months, a year, or years from now. Once again, you're absolutely right about horrifying wars that have been brought forth upon us by the military-industrial complex, the neocon establishment, the blob here in Washington. There's no doubt about that. However, in this particular case, while it's not black and white, while getting into it, we didn't necessarily have clean hands either. The idea that we are so eager to give the Kremlin whatever they want, as though the needs of the Ukrainian people do not matter at all, is a complete switch from support of our European allies to support of Vladimir Putin for reasons that none of us have quite figured out yet, but I think it's coming.
Well, I disagree, but that's the point of the show.
That's the point of the show.
Tell us what you think in the comments. Let us know. I'll be reading them. Next up, an author who has written extensively about Donald Trump will be fleshing out more of those Russian connections, and I will be arguing against that vociferously. It will be spicy. Stay tuned.
Author Sarah Kendzior has been fascinated by Trump and Trump world for years. It led her to write her first book, published in 2020. It's called Hiding in Plain Sight, an account of Trump's calculated rise to power stemming from the 1980s. Her second book, They Knew, How a Culture of Conspiracy Keeps America Complacent, published in 2022, delves into why conspiracy theories have run amok. Joining us now to dive in deeper is author Sarah Kendzior. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
You know, I've read your books. I think everybody should read your books. It's sort of like our worst nightmares come true in a certain way. But also, you talk about how important it is to do things early to prevent the worst consequences. You say we already passed that deadline. But can you give our listeners just a little bit of an idea? What exactly happened here? When did it start? You talk about an international crime syndicate that's actually having its way with the world, including now the United States. Can you give us a little thumbnail? Tell people what's going on here.
Sure. I just want to be clear that it's not just like, a room and with a secret cabal with a dozen individuals. It's nothing like that. It's a series of broken systems and people within those systems who are able to act without any kind of accountability for their actions due to their wealth and power. In terms of its modern iteration, I think it began with the election of Ronald Reagan and really gained ground during Iran-Contra and the collapse of the former Soviet Union, which led a lot of mafiosos from the former Soviet Union to be able to leave and then to participate in the kind of oligarch-run gutting of what was the USSR. And I think that that's been their model for what they want to do to the United States. It's for what they want to do to the UK. It's for what they've already done to countries like Hungary and other places that have been bases for this network. So it's really the merger of organized crime, corporate crime, and state corruption reaching out of control levels in the 21st century.
You know, Sarah, one of the things I remember very distinctly is that in 2016 election, at the Republican convention, there were reports about the committee that normally meets to discuss the platform, how it was very late at night and Paul Manafort came in and he took out a piece of paper from the platform that had something to do with challenging Russia. You talk quite a lot about the Paul Manafort connection in terms of Trump. Can you give us a little bit of information about that?
Sure. Well, Paul Manafort, like Trump and like his partner, Roger Stone, were mentored by Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn, of course, is a mafia lawyer, a GOP advisor, and just an all around, bad person that people would turn to when they want to get dirty business done. That's who mentored Manafort. Manafort and Stone then started the Torturers Lobby, and they began working with businessmen, quote unquote, like Donald Trump in the early 80s. So Trump and Manafort had been connected for a long time. During that time, Manafort began working abroad, and right before the 2016 election, had been working primarily for Kremlin interests, in particular in Ukraine. And so, when Paul Manafort joined the Trump campaign as a advisor and was treated by cable media as just kind of a regular GOP kind of guy instead of the literal co-founder of the Torturers Lobby, and this is not a secret. This is all information one can just get from newspapers and magazines of old. It was a signal, of course, about Trump's relationship with Russia, his ties to members of the Russian mafia in particular, and to Russian oligarchs. But you don't even need Paul Manafort for that. You could look at Trump's own statements, his own records, his own financial transactions, his own businesses, and you see a very long and consistent history there.
Well, let me ask you this. Your books have been major bestsellers. The elite, the establishment, they have read them. Given that so much of this information has been known, revealed by you and others, how come Robert Mueller was not able to do anything that you would see as genuine preventative measures holding anyone to account that needed to be held account?
That's a great question. And I think it's one of the biggest misunderstandings that kind of every political side has about Trump. Trump is not attacked by the FBI. Trump is in a complicit arrangement with the FBI, and there have been multiple members of the FBI who have worked for the Russian mafia either while in office or after leaving office. That includes William Sessions, Louis Freeh. You had James Comey taking Semyon Mogilevich, the head of the Russian mafia, off of the most wanted list in 2015 once Trump became the candidate. And Trump has had this tight relationship with them, formed through alliances with people like Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, as mayor, one of the main things Giuliani did, was get rid of the Italian American mafia. But what came to replace it was this transnational mafia it's often referred to as a Russian mafia, but ethnically and geographically, that's not really what they are. These are individuals who have multiple passports, they have offshore accounts, they cross borders, digital media, digital currency. All of that has been tremendously beneficial to them. And that is who is upholding this current, for lack of a better word, new world order. It's too bad that that phrase has been claimed by so many whack jobs because it really does describe what's going on. But yeah, the FBI has served as Trump's protector for a long time. Trump was first investigated by the Department of Justice in 1973. That's a half century of them going after Trump. And it's not that they don't find anything. It's that Trump uses the tools of the trade that Roy Cohn taught him in order to elude justice. And he has a lot of partners within the highest levels of government, particularly at the DOJ and FBI, there to preserve his power.
So your view is that Donald Trump is working with the deep state to promote the interests of the Kremlin and the Russian mafia. I guess, how is that not itself a conspiracy theory? I mean, this is so out there that I honestly don't even know how to respond to it. It's so self-evidently
Trump
absurd.
is the deep state that he pretends to rail against. And I think as an individual, he's after what many individuals in his position want, which is, money, power, immunity from prosecution. I don't think he's a geographical mastermind. I don't even think he's the person who comes up with this plot. But I think you really have to ignore everything that's transpired over the last couple decades and over Trump's own life to think that there are not a group of plutocrats and oligarchs who want to strip different countries down for parts, take over those resources themselves, and pay no mind to the needs of the people living in these countries, how they are hurt, what our rights are, what our freedom is. I'm less concerned with people like Donald Trump getting punished than the fact that the people of the United States and other people are being punished for doing nothing. We're just trying to live our lives and get by in a system this corrupt.
I mean, what are the policy implications of what you're saying? I mean, right, with respect to Ukraine, Russia, Trump right now is trying to arrange a deal to bring the fighting to the end and is, sparring with Zelensky over that. Is that, in your view, part of some kind of corruption to want to bring the horrific mass killing of Ukrainians to an end?
I hope that the horrific mass killing of Ukrainians and of Russians does come to an end. The best way to do that would be for Putin to stop invading Ukraine. I think that what Trump is doing is likely part of a greater geopolitical alignment. I do agree that Biden was a failure in handling this conflict. I think people have suffered unnecessarily, but the person who instigated this conflict was Vladimir Putin and his invasion. And I don't think that Trump has a sincere humanitarian interest at all in trying to protect the lives of Ukrainian people any more than he has a sincere humanitarian interest in protecting Americans.
Well, who cares? What does it matter what the sincere interest is? Shouldn't we be results focused? I mean, the people on the other side of this issue are just saying, what, more support, more weapons, more funding. That's just going to be more people getting killed and eventually Russia conquering the rest of Ukraine anyway. Like, I, like you, wish that Vladimir Putin would just, for some reason, wake up and his heart is 3 sizes bigger than it was and not try to invade Ukraine. Like, that's fantastic in an ideal world, but don't we have to deal with reality? And the reality is that there is no way to get back the territory Russia conquered short of starting World War III, which we are not willing to do, and you're not even willing to do. And so what is the alternative?
I think the alternative is you let Ukraine make its own decisions and you respect that they've been embroiled in this war, which they did not bring upon themselves, and you don't reward autocrats. I mean, the key lesson from all of these decades is that you do not let people like Putin, like Trump, who if you give them an inch, they'll take the world. You do not give them anything. You do not reward this kind of behavior. I think that the Biden administration squandered the opportunity to end this conflict quickly. To me, it looks like they dragged it out for a long time, and now Trump is coming in and entering and quote unquote making peace, a peace that provides no justice, no freedom, no sovereignty. It's a dangerous kind of peace because the model will then be used to invade other countries. It won't stop with just the takeover of Ukraine. It will take over, they'll move to maybe Moldova, maybe northern Kazakhstan, other areas that used to be part of the Soviet Union that Putin has, seen as a great loss for himself and his political power. I mean, people are making, quote, realistic decisions, but the realism there is just, how can I extend my power? How can I make more money? Those are not good ways to run a nation if you have any regard for the suffering of the people that have to live within it. And I do think that that's something, worthwhile. I don't think that that's something that should just be dismissed as some sort of idealistic pipe dream. I think that that's why we're here to live our lives, to try to protect each other, and form stronger nations and have a real and meaningful peace.
Sarah, thank you so much. I love your truth-telling. I love your courage, your bravery. I think you're the go-to person for people who don't want to keep their heads in the sand. So thank you very, very much. A lot of what you said reminds me of that movie out now called The Apprentice, which I think gives a little background material. Thank you very much. Stay with everything you're doing. We need you right now. Thank you so much.
Up next, are the Dems finally changing their media strategy? We will look at that. Stay tuned. Well, it looks like Democrats are rolling out a new media strategy. Max Tani of Semaphore reports that House Democrats are welcoming at least 40 new media journalists and digital creators today. Democratic aide told Tani that the goal was to help get out the caucus's message mid Trump's speech to Congress later tonight. Now, it's highly possible that the reason the Dems are doing this is because some of their talking points are starting to get a bit repetitive. Take a look at this.
When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
That ain't true. That's what you just heard. Since day one of Donald Trump's presidency, prices are not down, they're up. Inflation is getting worse, not better. The prices of grocery, gas, housing, eggs, of essentials, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has done enough goose eggs to lower prices. Instead, he's pardoned violent criminals who savagely beat police officers.
On January
He's letting Elon Musk take a chainsaw to vital government programs, and then, even worse, giving him access to Americans' most sensitive data. Social Security numbers, tax returns, health care bills. He's fired thousands of essential workers, people who help our veterans get their benefits, people fighting Ebola in Africa so it doesn't come here. He's frozen funding for vital programs that
Democrats will be hosting a spin room after Trump's address with these 40 new digital media creators.
Assistant News Director, Florida Voice, Eric Dougherty, wrote on X, folks, this is why the Democratic Party is dead on arrival, unoriginal, propagandistic, dishonest, no grassroots campaigns or independent thought. Everything is about manipulation and gaslighting. It is why they lost in 2024. Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri joined the fun, writing, look, guys, we lost the election in part because people think we are disconnected from the average person. I have an idea. Let's post canned speeches and act like they're real. Senator Mike Lee wrote, it's almost like someone's telling Democrats what to say. And yeah, when you can't bother to vary up your talking points even slightly, that is a sign they need to bring in some young people to help them, I think.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth what you're saying about young people. I think that because the Democrats have not, over the last few decades, actually spoken with the kind of authenticity and unabashed advocacy for the working people of the United States that is the core principle, theoretically, of the Democratic Party, it's lost us a lot of people, lost a lot of America's working class, and certainly lost a lot of America's young people. So to put up there people who everybody's seen for decades and decades and decades now, rather than the new voices. Now, there are good voices, though. Senator Chris Murphy's doing a great job, Jasmine Crockett, Greg Cesar. There are great new voices, but some of these old ones should have the honor and the integrity to step aside and let some new people in. So we'll see what these digital content creators are coming up with. You know I'll be watching tonight. Listen, I've had my criticism of a lot of that myself. But at this point, Robby, so many millions of Americans, both within the Democratic Party and outside the Democratic Party, want very, very much for there to be a true resistance and a true compelling alternative to what the Trump administration and Elon Musk most specifically are offering at this moment.
I think what MAGA understands better about the moment we're living in than the Democratic Party is that you have to be engaging and personal, and the message has to be transmitted by someone who is interesting and colorful and that you like to be successful. And Democrats, to your, you just made this point, but are still trotting. I mean, the Democratic Party is so hierarchical. I know you've run into this in your efforts to become DNC chair. It's this next guy's turn, even if the next guy is ancient and has cancer, and specifically calling out Jerry Connolly here, him rather than AOC, who is like one of the only, someone I disagree with vociferously, but one of the only people in the Democratic coalition who has some ability to resonate with actual Trump voters. There are people who voted for Trump and voted for AOC in her district that she tried to understand and engage with. So yeah, bring in some content creators, honestly. That is not a dumb idea. They are so lost in terms of how to reach young people that are moving aggressively to the right. Gen Z is the most right-leaning age cohort of all right now, which is crazy.
Okay, well, two things. First of all, I'm still stuck back a couple of minutes. Elon Musk is hardly an engaging, charming messenger of anything. So that's number one. Number two, yes, there had been a move among young people towards the right for the election, but a lot's been happening since the election, and they are moving right back. There are a lot of people, Robby, whether they are on the left or the right, who are deeply distrustful of what appears to many to be at least an ideological, if not a political and economic coup of the U.S. government. So let's not lose sight of the bigger picture.
They won.
Listen, I have voted for Republican. Excuse me, I've never voted for a Republican, but I have voted for Democrats when Republicans won the presidency. But I did not see them as there to destroy this country. I have never seen a Republican president before who showed so little respect for the U.S. Constitution or for the rule of law or for the three co-equal branches of government. So I don't care whether you're concerned.
Family members on the way out the door.
Well, what do you think the way that Elon Musk is acting right now, this is not cutting out fat. This is cutting into the marrow of the bone. This is causing trauma. Russ Vought, who's head of the Office of Management and Budget, actually said he wants to traumatize the federal workforce. We have medical researchers that are being let go.
They got to show up for their jobs now?
No. I'm talking about people who are being fired, Robby. I'm talking about food in warehouses in the Sudan and in Somalia that is not being delivered to people who are starving. I'm talking about an unelected, unvetted, unscrupulous billionaire who has the money without even affecting his own lifestyle to feed millions and millions of starving people, who instead is on social media bragging about the fact that he's withholding funding for starving people. And I want to know what's going on, that even our Secretary of State, once again, vetted, absolutely, he has said that he will make sure that money is funding those agencies so that food is delivered to starving people. He's being overridden by Elon Musk. I wonder what Marco Rubio thinks about that.
I would love this to be the Democratic Party's message to Americans. Maybe we'll take out a collection bin. Can I have your paycheck to send to Somalia, please? We would like to give more money to Somalia. Ask Americans what they would hate that. They want America first. They have rejected the give all our money to Somalia approach time and time again. Look, it's always easy to be generous with other people's money.
Compared to other democracies, we give
Tiny percent is fine.
I, as an American taxpayer, am proud of the fact that we are a generous. And also, let me tell you something. This is helping to create peace in the world. The more upset, the more volatility, the more desperation you have, the more vulnerable people are to genuine ideological capture, and also more vulnerable to the influence of countries like China. So it is in our national interest, and it is certainly in the interest of all the moral compass of the human species, to be there to do what we can to help people who are in desperate need. Not only there, but also it's people in this country. If you're so America first, why is it okay that so many federal workers are being traumatized? Why is it okay that the parklands, I'll tell you why the parklands, all of a sudden, all these people being fired who took care of those parklands, so that people will not see what's going on. This is all about chopping up the resources of the United States. This is a hostile takeover, just like in business, so that you take these distressed parts and then sell them off. That's what's happening here.
The federal employees are nice people too, trying to do their work. I'm not trying to malign them as an entire category, but I think it's wrong to see the federal government as some kind of jobs program for people.
This is not about
our money, so it has to be decided, is this important? Is this necessary? Is this vital? And a lot of it is not. And Marco Rubio, who you mentioned a minute ago, yes, I think he was the architect, an ideological figure for a lot of policies that were absolutely terrible as recently as a year and a half ago, which is why I didn't really trust him to be the Secretary of State. He was the Trump pick I was most opposed to of all, because he has been all for increasing funding to USAID, increasing funding for all of these things, but he has fallen in line with Trump because Trump knows, unlike Marco Rubio, that stuff is not popular. That stuff is not America first, and we're changing it. The American people had no idea the vast amount of federal spending that was going on under the auspices of some of these programs, and now we're changing that, and they're going to love it.
The American people want an excellent government. They want a functioning government. And like I said, this is cutting into the bone. This is going into the destruction. You were covering yesterday about the fact that
starving Somalians are cutting into the marrow.
Well, actually, in terms of our humanitarian values, yes. However, just talking about things going on here, what we're talking about is the fact that the American people want even if a president is going to say, I'm cutting jobs, and Bill Clinton cut many of them, hundreds of thousands of them, it was through a deliberative, expert process that had to do with forensic accounting, that had to do with serious, deliberative, sober understanding. When you say the American people want the fat cut, you have just Elon Musk going in there on this ketamine-fueled rampage with a few people who know about technology. They know nothing about government. They know nothing about these programs. This is not deliberative. This is just, he actually said to his tech group, he said, if you see any regulations that just seem dumb, get rid of them. This is not how a government is supposed to function. The American people want to feel that the U.S. government is functioning correctly. And that, if that means cutting out some jobs, then absolutely. But not the way it's being done by Elon Musk. Wow. This is absolutely not what should happen within a democracy and a respect for law.
Ketamine is not my drug of choice, so I disagree with Elon on that. We did speak with someone who's involved in the Bill Clinton government efficiency yesterday. It was a great interview. Viewers should go back and watch that from yesterday. And we've got another great interview today with Katherine Eban of Vanity Fair on lab leak stuff. Stay tuned for that. The Trump administration is now free of another thorn in its side. The head of the FBI's New York field office, James Dennehy, says he's been forced out of his job. He sent a letter to his colleagues Monday, reading in part, "Late Friday, I was informed that I needed to put my retirement papers in today, which I just did. I was not given a reason for this decision. Regardless, I apologize to all of you for not being able to fulfill my commitment to you." On Friday, Attorney General Pam Bondi had accused the FBI's New York office, which Dennehy had led, of withholding documents relating to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. She ordered an investigation into the matter.
Earlier this month, the Justice Department demanded that FBI officials fill out a form that asks whether they were involved in the January 6 investigations. FBI leaders were also told to hand over any information on current or former employees who worked on January 6 investigations.
Dennehy wrote an email to his staff last month responding to the Justice Department's demands. He said, "Today we find ourselves in the middle of a battle of our own as good people are being walked out of the FBI and others are being targeted because they did their jobs in accordance with the law and with FBI policy. I'll support each and every one of you, whatever personal decisions you make, but I'm sticking around to defend your work, your families, and the team we call the flagship."
In his parting message Monday, Dennehy wrote, "I've been told many times in my life, when you find yourself in a hole, sometimes it's best to quit digging. Screw that. I will never stop defending this joint. I'll just do it willingly and proudly from outside the wire."
Dennehy joined the FBI in 2002. His career mostly consisted of counterintelligence investigations and supervisions. Substacker Jeff Carlson wrote in part on X, "Not a huge surprise given events of the last week surrounding the Epstein files. Great to see the immediate follow-through." Podcaster Brian Krasenstein wrote, "Breaking, head of the FBI's New York office, James Dennehy, is forced out after he questioned Trump's pursuit of agents investigating January 6th. These are the actions you'd seek with a dictator." On the other hand, Newsmax host Todd Starnes wrote James Dennehy's office was accused of withholding documents relating to the Epstein files. Why was he allowed to resign? Fire the man and charge him with obstruction. Play hardball, Republicans. I am happy that this swiftly took place because the Epstein files release was just a disaster. Influencers being handed binders full of information that had already been released to the public, in some cases for years. I did my radar on this yesterday, actually. A lot of correct anger in MAGA world, including from people I don't usually agree with, Stephen Bannon and Laura Loomer, but they were furious that MAGA people were being forced to accept information we already have. We want disclosure. And we know, and mainstream media has admitted, that the FBI does have thousands of more files that they've compiled on Epstein that they have not released. Now, I think MAGA sometimes hypes the expectation too much for what's actually going to be in more of these files, but more could be released, and it hasn't. Pam Bondi's in charge. She is right to fire this person for that reason. I don't think they're being fired for the January 6th related reason, because they would have been fired back then. They've been fired as a result of not preparing the files for distribution in accordance with what Pam Bondi ordered.
Well, no matter what your politics are, something too much is unknown about the Epstein case. And so I don't have a problem with the fact that the Attorney General, no matter who he or she is, wants the information that she asks for. On that, you're correct. However, this issue of saying to FBI agents, you've done something wrong. If you were investigating according to the directions given you by the Attorney General at the time, at what every American should have seen as a proper reason to investigate, which is that there was an assault on the U.S. Capitol. Now we're punishing FBI agents for doing their job, and for doing their job that's as important as that. And then there's a culture of snitching that this administration is really into. We want you to snitch on your colleagues, snitch on your employees. So not only are they saying, tell us if you helped investigate January 6th, but also tell us who else helped, as though they had done something wrong. They didn't do something wrong. They were trying to protect our Capitol. They were trying to protect our democracy, and the people who are coming after them are the ones that we need to be looking at.
Well, I don't personally have much interest in relitigating January 6th or going after people who were involved in investigating it. I don't. Yeah, this is very silly and in the past, and we should just let it go at this point. The MAGA obsession with that is not doing them a lot of good. A culture of snitching, though, I mean, I do want FBI agents to speak up if they think there's wrongdoing by other
I agree.
agents.
That's
or by
whistleblowing.
the
That's not
yeah.
snitching. There's a difference
Well,
between whistleblowing. This is snitching, though. If you're told, you need to tell us what other people did their job. You know, they're also setting up a hotline. Have you heard about that? So that if you hear about any educators, any teachers who are mentioning anything that could have to do with diversity or equity or inclusion, call this hotline and snitch. This is not what's supposed to happen in a free society.
Well, no, I am very against snitch headlines. I remember, in fact, when the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, chose as her running mate Tim Walz, someone whose state had set up a snitch line for people during COVID to report their neighbors for not proper behavior and not following social distancing guidelines. I think many Democratic officials are the biggest snitches of all. But yes, I don't. There's no need to tell on people.
If that's true, I agree with you, because snitching is, you know, that's the kind of thing you hear about, like in the old Soviet Union, where everybody's distrusting their neighbor because they might get turned in for something. That's not what we want in America, and that's not even a left-right issue.
No, I agree with that. I think that was so much of that mindset was so damaging during COVID, and actually we're going to speak to a guest, not on this aspect of COVID, but we will have a guest later today to discuss latest revelations with the lab leak. Look, in terms of Trump, or I guess the Republican war on the FBI and law enforcement, but don't you agree that law enforcement has tremendous power to deprive people of their right to pursue investigations into people, to overcharge, to punish disproportionate to the amount of crime. I mean, this is kind of textbook standard progressive or left-wing thinking, is it not?
No, healthy skepticism about government in any of its aspects is absolutely something that I believe is required for conscious citizenship, and they do have a lot of power, and they should be looked at. At the same time, I believe the majority of people who work in all America's intelligence agencies are good men and women who are being purged at this time for reasons that are themselves nefarious. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I supported charging, arresting, sentencing particularly violent people who engaged in violence on January 6th inside the Capitol. I don't think their actions, or even their leaders' actions, amounted to terrorism, for which you would go away for 20 plus years, which they pursued against some of them, and I thought it was appropriate to wipe that away. But jail sentences commensurate with a violent riot, yes, totally on board with that. I didn't agree with Trump doing the blanket pardon for all of them. Neither did Kash Patel. Incidentally, when he was asked about it during his confirmation hearing, he said, no, I wouldn't have done a blanket pardon. J.D. Vance said he didn't want to do a blanket pardon, but they ultimately did that, and we have to live with it.
They're not sending us their best people.
All right, more rising still to come. Stay tuned. COVID came from a lab in Wuhan. That was an assessment the FBI made in 2021. The FBI has scientific experts and expertise since anthrax scares became part of the post-9/11 era. As for COVID-19, what has not been known is how and why the FBI believed that virus came from a lab. We have more insights on that. Katherine Eban has been reporting on the origins of COVID for Vanity Fair for the last few years, and she had an interview with former senior scientists for the FBI's forensic response team. Here to elaborate on this reporting is Katherine Eban herself, a special correspondent at Vanity Fair. Thanks for joining us again, Katherine. Love discussing this subject with you.
Thanks. Great to be back.
So what I found most interesting about your piece this time around is you go into really granular detail about the vast number of bat specimens collected by the Wuhan scientists, and that being likely a motivating reason for the FBI to make this determination, just looking at the sheer amount of specimens they collected, and then their evasiveness, and they change that happened in Wuhan, the changing of labels of like what the virus was called, including ones that kind of resemble COVID. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So, one of the central questions that the FBI had to tackle is, how did a bat coronavirus arrive in Wuhan primed to infect humans? And these are bats. It's the a certain type of horseshoe bat that is not native to Wuhan. So how did it get there? So then you have this, large research complex that has one of the largest repositories of virus samples. We know that they were harvesting bat coronavirus samples in southern China, in Yunnan province, and the FBI zeroed in on an abandoned mine shaft in Mojang County in Yunnan province, where in 2012, 6 miners became gravely ill shoveling out bat guano from that mine shaft. The WIV took samples from that mine shaft, and one of them was called 4991, which proved to be the closest known progenitor, one of them, to SARS-CoV-2. Now, they were doing research with 4991 and a related family of viruses for years. So this is some of the fact pattern that the FBI looked at when they made their moderate confidence assessment.
And then the evasiveness came when questions were asked about that, and that the label for that virus got actually changed. That there seemed to be some desire to hide, to shield, and then what research got published, missing key information about where it actually had come from. You know, that could just be secrecy for secrecy's sake. Sometimes governments operate in that way. We might have expected this level of trying to misguide us from the authoritarian Chinese state, no matter what. But it seems like the FBI said, yeah, this is really, really, really suspicious. Maybe if there's smoke, there is fire.
Right. So there are all kinds of reasons why scientists may not publish information or samples that they have. Maybe it doesn't fit into the kind of research they're doing, but the fact of the matter is they excised information about lineage 4, which is the lineage with 4991 in it, for a Western forward-facing journal. But it was in the thesis that one of Shuzheng Li's researchers and grad students did, which came out in June 2019 before the pandemic. This was a family of viruses. They had thousands of samples from Yunnan province and many from the Mojang mine. Those were not disclosed until after the pandemic began, and then they were disclosed sort of drip, drip, drip with shifting information that required updating and more detailed information. So, you know, I think it's important to stress that the FBI's assessment, moderate confidence assessment, it isn't proof, but it's a weighing of evidence. You know, and the problem with the natural origin hypothesis is, yes, it is how we've seen coronaviruses typically emerge, is a natural spillover in animals, but those animals, infected animals, have not been found in this case.
Yes.
So, you know, you have a key piece of information that's missing, and then you have this history of research with a closely aligned family of viruses to SARS-CoV-2.
Yes, and I saw that Ralph Barrick, who you mention in your most recent piece, this is a lead epidemiologist involved in conversations and knowledge of what Wuhan was doing, warned Xi Jinping to do this research in a safer laboratory, and that guidance was not followed. He actually had an opinion piece in the New York Times this week warning that very similar research is still being done in Wuhan. And you know, you would have thought that while we don't know for sure, and we should be remaining open to any possibilities, frankly, the possibility of this starting in a wet market suggests to me that reforming those practices would be absolutely fine too, and then also reforming the research. Let's just cover both situations honestly from the standpoint of not having diseases arise. The idea that they're still doing this research, and then that the research was being published in a scientific journal Cell, like no one is concerned that the same thing is going on still. That's crazy to me.
Well, you know, people are concerned for sure, and that op-ed in the New York Times reflects that concern. You know, I should say this, which is I've been now reporting on the question of COVID-19's origins for about 4 years. And in the beginning, you know, it was branded as a conspiracy theory. We're not there at all now. I mean, we have a divided intelligence community. The World Health Organization says that the origin is not known. We need more information from China. So we don't know the answer, but what's clear is that laboratory accidents do happen all the time. And there are differing regulations and different standards from country to country, And so if you have a country and a laboratory that's doing extremely aggressive research and they're doing it in a BSL-2 setting, which doesn't have proper containment protocols for risky research, it is not a crazy question to ask. Could a virus like COVID-19 have come from a laboratory, especially considering the kind of research they were doing there?
It is so fascinating to watch this conversation develop. As you know, people branded conspiracy theorists for initially speculating that the origins could be something other than natural spillover. We were still hoping for disclosure, especially with a new administration coming in. Not that the origins of COVID needs to be politicized whatsoever, but there has been more interest, seemingly, among elected Republicans for really probing this question. I would love to know what made the Energy Department, for instance, make their determination. What I really want to know is if the intelligence communities have anything along the lines of what the Wall Street Journal reported, which is that there were actually 6 scientists at the Wuhan Institute before the initial outbreak at the wet market. That to me would be a very close to a smoking gun if you had actually sick people with a number of them very similar symptoms before the wet market. Is there any suggestion? Do we have any suggestion that intelligence knows that and is why their conclusions have been along those lines?
Yeah, we do have that. In fact, that's in our story, Robby, which is that classified intelligence confirms sick researchers. And the question of sick researchers has come up in classified disclosures. Now, of course, you can say it's, cold and flu season in the autumn of 2019. And people got sick.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, what were they sick with? I don't think that is known, but the fact that they were sick and that they were Shuzheng Li's researchers and graduate students, I believe, is confirmed by classified intelligence. I should say that 2 of the scientists involved have publicly denied that, but there is intelligence which confirms it. But, the question of what they were sick with, I don't know that is confirmed. And of course, COVID symptoms can be anything from no symptoms at all and asymptomatic to death. So there is a wide range. But there are, I also actually want to add that the intelligence agencies are divided, but the ones that have assessed a lab origin may have done so for slightly different reasons. We now know, as we've reported, that the FBI was focused on work being done at BSL-2 laboratories. From the New York Times is reporting on the CIA's shift in assessment towards a lab leak. They're focused on the high containment laboratory at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Other reporting has pointed that the Department of Energy is interested in the Wuhan CDC, which relocated, I believe it was in December 2019, and is across the street from the Wuhan market where we first saw the virus explode. So there is a lot that we still don't know.
Katherine, thank you so much. So much of what you said is so depressing about what happened in the past, but in a way, even more depressing about what could possibly happen in the future. You made some comment about nobody's doing anything. In the proper functioning of the U.S. government, under whose purview would this be handled and really taken care of going forward?
Well, that's a great question. So the Biden administration created something called OPPR, the Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response. That is an office now that is within the White House. There is discussion about whether that is going to be allied with that function in the National Security Council. So it's not clear exactly what the structure is going to be. But, I should add, we have a bird flu outbreak of incredible severity, which is largely going unchecked. I did a big story about that for Vanity Fair. And that has pandemic potential.
And that
So, and we're at a moment where the Trump administration has announced its intention to withdraw from the World Health Organization. It has sort of severed a crucial communication link between the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the WHO. So, there is a very tenuous feeling right now from people who are tracking infectious diseases closely. There's a sense that we are not really manning up to meet this moment. We still don't have the answer to what caused the last pandemic, and we're potentially facing another one.
According to your research, how damaging do you think it is that we are cutting ourselves off from the World Health Organization, that we are diminishing, in fact, in many cases, even scrapping all medical research and medical care to make sure that the bird flu doesn't affect us and so forth? How bad do you think this is? How worried do you think we should all be?
I mean, I think it's incredibly serious. We're essentially opting to have less information and to not have a seat at the table. My sources told me that at the last WHO meeting, the US was participating in listening only mode and only sent 2 people, and China rushed to fill the void and sent dozens of people. So, you have an international body that is like first eyes and ears. You cannot fight viruses alone in isolation from the rest of the world, because viruses don't care, about who's in a treaty or not. They don't care where a border ends. It is really needs to be an international pursuit to protect the world. So I think it's extremely short-sighted.
Katherine Eban, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be on.
Next up, a prominent influencer was banned from his primary platform. We will discuss. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken out on the current war and the situation, the tension with the United States. Zelensky took to X Tuesday morning, just now, writing in a lengthy statement, "I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us want an endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We are ready to work fast to end the war, and the first stages could be the release of prisoners and truce in the sky, ban on missiles, long-range drones, bombs, energy, and other civilian infrastructure, and truce in the sea immediately if Russia will do the same. Then we want to move very fast through all next stages and to work with the U.S. to agree a strong final deal. We do really value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence, and we remember the moment when things changed when President Trump provided Ukraine with javelins. We are grateful for this. Our meeting in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it anytime and in any convenient format." So there is Zelensky addressing what happened last week and saying that he still wants to reach this deal, which I think is great, and that they should do that immediately. Cooler heads can prevail on all sides, and I think that would be a good thing.
Yes, and I hope the president will be open to that statement from Zelensky. It's an actual negotiation. It's an actual deal that he is proposing. He had said a few days ago that the war would be going on for a while, so it was important that he made that correction. And I think he's trying to really show up for this process. He's trying to make right as best he can his part of what went wrong at that meeting on Friday. And I hope that the president will have the grace to allow this to restart a real conversation, so that people on both sides, the killing will stop.
Yes.
And a genuine peace, a true peace, which would be based along the lines, I think, of what Zelensky just proposed, can be achieved, and we can move on.
Yes, I agree, and I hope and I think that Trump is still interested in that. He has indicated that he still wants to make this deal happen, and that he's ready when Zelensky is. So maybe they're not as far apart as they seem, and it'll be interesting to hear more from Trump tonight. He's going to give this joint session that it's essentially the State of the Union, although we don't call it the State of the Union for some reason when it's a new president in their first year. He will be having an opportunity to reaffirm that he does want Trump make this deal with Zelensky happen, so we can just bring this awful war to a close. And I know, and I'm not blind whatsoever to the reality that it was started by Putin, and that Putin needs to commit to actually peace with Ukraine as well for it to happen. It has to be an understanding that the rest of Ukraine is secure, and I would rather have like an implicit security guarantee, because I don't want to get bogged down there in war, or one from Europe. But an understanding with Putin that, okay, this can't go on any further, and then you would be in confrontation with us if you did. And I want to hear them say, yes, we acknowledge that, and then we're good.
In 1994, even with an explicit security guarantee, Ukraine was betrayed. They were betrayed by us, by Russia, and by the UK. The most important part of that statement were the specifics that Zelensky mentioned, and that's very different than what Trump had said before. Trump had said before, the Kremlin will get what they want. You roll over, and by the way, we want your minerals. I hope that we will, on the American side, really show up for the kind of negotiating points that Zelensky mentioned in that statement.
Well, if we're getting these,
we'll see.
If we're getting these minerals, we are committed to. Russia cannot continue the invasion of Ukraine. It will be. That would put them in conflict with us and with our interests. So this is actually a way to get us more involved in the safety and security of Ukraine, in a way, frankly, that I am a little concerned about, because that could put us more in harm's way. Now, I do think it can be of value to be economically tied to want to participate in the success of another nation economically. I'm for engagement in economic ways to better our country and better our friends. That I'm for. I'm not like an isolationist that I think we should just be building everything. We should just become autonomous like North Korea or something. You see how well it works for North Korea. They can't keep their lights on at night. So we don't want to do that, but we don't want to have World War III.
No, I just think that what Trump has been proposing is as much of a risk of World War III as anything that Zelensky has been proposing. So let's see what happens. We'll learn tonight. And of course, everybody be with us tomorrow, because I'm sure we'll be talking about the speech tonight.
Yes, Marianne, you will be back with us tomorrow.
Yes,
so we will have a lot to react to. That should be fun. More Rising right after this. Twitch streamer Hasan Piker, big leftist, was suspended from that platform, Twitch. In case you don't know his name, he is a very progressive, very left streamer who has 2.8 million subscribers. During his show, Piker was commenting on an interview between House Speaker Mike Johnson and CNN anchor Caitlin Collins. Johnson had said Doge was going to look into Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid to try to carve out waste, fraud, and abuse. And then Piker said this.
If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott. The reason why I'm saying if you cared about Medicare or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott is because, and not make him a prominent part of the Republican Party, is because he, to this day, is still also known as committing the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history.
Piker was referring to when Senator Rick Scott was the CEO of Columbia HCA around 10 years ago. The company was fined $1.7 billion for Medicare fraud.
Well, it's not entirely clear why Twitch banned Piker. He seemed to think his comments there were the reason, and I have no reason to doubt that that was the reason he got banned. He wrote on X after they banned him, "I'm sorry, I'll choose my words carefully next time and say, if Mike Johnson cares about Medicare fraud since he wants to cut $800 million from Medicare, he'd call for max punishment for current Florida GOP Senator, former Governor Rick Scott, who has done the most Medicare fraud in U.S. history." Piker has been suspended from Twitch in the past. For instance, in 2021, he used a slur for white people, and that got him kicked off the platform for a while. In 2019, he was criticized for saying that the U.S. deserved 9/11. Political commentator and filmmaker Mike Cernovich wrote on X, "Hasan Piker regularly does live streams with AOC. Will a Congressional Ethics Committee investigation into their relationship be opened?" I don't know if that's necessary. And actually, this may surprise some people, or it shouldn't, because I'm a principled person. I'm going to defend Hasan Piker here, who I don't agree with whatsoever on anything, including this. Should he have phrased it in a way that makes it sound sort of like he was advocating violence? But he was not advocating violence against Rick Scott. He was doing a hypothetical thing. And so, to my mind, that is very different from actually calling for violence. Now, was it a good idea? No. Is Twitch free to implement its policies however they see fit as a private company? Yes. But to my mind, that did not at all rise to the level of violent threat.
We're disguising the real issue here. And first of all, it's not $800 million that they're talking about taking away from Medicare and Medicaid. It's $800 billion. Mm-hmm. And so the rage that people are feeling about the prospect of taking money away from Medicare. It's interesting. You mentioned J.D. Vance lecturing Europeans about free speech. Well, what's happening here? That these tech companies are telling people that you can't express the rage. Look at what happened with this horrifying murder of the United Healthcare CEO. People are angry, and people are angry right now at the idea that $800 billion could be taken away from Medicare. So, of course, people are going to be talking about it on Twitch, and they should be talking about it in every possible platform. And the fact that some tech company is trying to say you're off the platform because you're mentioning it. Oh, it's because you sounded slightly violent. Once again, this is just, of course, people are outraged, and we better allow people to say that they are outraged before the outrage begins to be expressed in very, very malfunctional, even malevolent ways.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it is not healthy to stop people from expressing their outrage if they feel that way. I'm sure more mainstream people or more violent rhetoric, so scary kind of brain-pilled people who I tend not to agree with are thinking, oh, well, this kind of rhetoric contributes to someone doing like the Luigi Mangione attack, like he's encouraging people to do that. I really don't think the way that's how violence works.
I agree with that entirely.
And that is an excuse to do censorship. The people
making
I agree.
That. No, we agree on this.
So we agree on that. Now, however, I do draw. Look, it's Twitch's company. They can do what they want, and it's different than my problem and J.D. Vance's problem with European bureaucrats, with the government telling the company it has to take down speech is. I mean, that does violate our First Amendment, right, if we're talking about the U.S. Them just telling you to do it, we can still criticize it, but it's not the same legal circumstance.
For the United States to tell Germans, after everything that they went through in World War II and the Holocaust, you should let Nazis speak if they want.
Oh, I agree with that. I 100% think.
What? Dare we? And
we will dare. We will absolutely dare.
Well, J.D. Vance will dare, and Donald Trump will dare because they have no.
Oh well, here we are going to disagree. I was horrified by the German speech police watching that interview where they gleefully discussed going door to door, barging into people's homes, arresting them, not just for Nazi speech, but for all kinds of extreme speech or misinformation or hate speech. That's all.
Kind of
like
what they're trying
Nazism
to do with
itself.
DEI here in the United States, huh, Robby? How about that? How about the fact that proposals are being rejected if they even have the word diversity or the word transition? There was one proposal that was talking about transitioning from high school to college, and yet the word transition was flagged because somebody thought
that's malicious compliance.
Pardon?
That is not being. No one is trying to stop you from transitioning from high school to college.
No, what I'm saying is that the words are being flagged. That's what I'm saying. Is that the words are being flagged because the way our government, instead of going on and on about how the Germans are handling their society, we need to be looking at what's happening right here with some of this DEI obsession.
These are our companies, and they're trying to tell our companies that, oh, if you want to operate in Germany, you got to take down all this speech that we don't like. How are we defending? We talked earlier in the show about defending Western liberal values. Free speech is the most central, most cardinal, most important Enlightenment value that we inherited from Europe. They're turning their back on it in order to police hate speech and misinformation.
Which is under attack here in the United States.
Not to the same extent it is. I agree with you.
Not to the same extent, but I think we should keep our eyes. I thought it was America first. America first should also be America first, looking at ourselves, atoning for our own mistakes, making amends for our own mistakes. What the Trump administration wants us to do, it's constant distraction, constant deflection. Look at everybody else so that you don't see what we are.
But these are supposed to be our friends, and they want our money. They're like, we want we're gonna order you around and do censorship, and then also give us money, please. No thanks. We're saying then no. Then go your own way and deal with this situation as you see fit.
When you say that, do you mean as in NATO?
As
when
in
you
NATO,
say give us
as in
your
the
money,
Ukrainian defense,
once again,
yes.
everybody, they've given a lot more money to on the Ukraine issue than we have.
Them all
and
together.
Listen, I agree with you. Europe needed to step up more.
Yeah.
But also, according to what's happening in the last couple of days, I think Europe is going to be stepping up more. They know the risk that Vladimir Putin poses to the European continent, and they're going to act like adults even if we won't.
Well, I think we're not done discussing this yet today. There was a statement that just came out from Zelensky that we're going to get to, that we already got to today due to the magic of television as we film things out of order. You will get to see that video as well if you haven't already. But that does do it for us today on Rising. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can listen to podcasts. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody.